Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a very exciting Figured Out Baseball podcast today, someone I'm really excited to get into a conversation with. This is Marty Sutherland on the call today. He's the associate head coach at the University of Iowa, of course in the Big Ten. I'll give you Coach Sutherland's background before we jump into questions with him. He started his playing career at Kirkwood Community College, a junior college in Iowa. He was there from 1999 until 2000. He then went on to play at Northern Iowa in 2001 and 2 for Coach Rick Heller, who's currently the head coach at the University of Iowa. The Northern Iowa team has since dropped their program, which we'll get into in a little bit here. At UNI, Coach Sutherland actually hit .318 for his career, so he could swing it a little bit back in the day. 2003, he started his coaching career as an assistant coach at Wartburg College. And then 2004 through 2009, he went to the University of Northern Iowa with Coach Heller to be an assistant coach. After the 2009 season, UNI dropped their program. At that point, Coach Sutherland went into the high school ranks. He was an assistant coach at Cascade High School in Iowa. He also worked at Bases Loaded Academy in Dubuque, Iowa, as a hitting coach and a defensive coach, fielding instructor. He got back into the college game when he was hired to be the recruiting coordinator at Iowa in the fall of 2013. 2014, his first spring at Iowa, his team led the Big Ten in batting average, hits, runs, and on-base percentage. In 2015, they had a recruiting class that was ranked number 18 nationally. On the spring, or on the field in the spring, they won 41 games, the second most in school history. They went to an NCAA regional. They were ranked as high as 20th in the country that season and finished the season nationally ranked for the first time in school history. They were ranked 11 nationally in defense. They had 6 all-conference players, which was a school record. They had 5 players drafted, which was tied for the most in school history. In 2017, Coach Sutherland was promoted to be the associate head coach. In the spring of 2017, in 2017, the team represented the United States at the World University Games in Taipei, Taiwan, where they earned a silver medal. In the spring that year, they won 39 games. They went to an NCAA regional again. They had an individual player that year who hit 29 home runs. That was a school record and also a Big Ten record. The team hit 71 home runs, which was the most at University of Iowa since 1999, probably with a different style of bat back then, I would say. They led the conference that year in hits, RBIs, and slugging percentage. They're in the top 25 in the NCAA in fielding percentage and double plays. Also set the school record that year for double plays turned. In 2018, they had 5 players drafted, again tied for the most in school history in a single season. 2019, they won 30-plus games for the 6th straight year. 2020, they had beaten 3 ranked teams and got off to a pretty good start before the season was cut short due to COVID-19. In 6 full seasons and 1 partial season at the University of Iowa, Coach Sutherland's teams have had 6 All-Americans. They've had 23 players drafted. Really, really great stuff they've done at the University of Iowa, Coach Sutherland and the rest of the staff. But Coach, I appreciate you being on the podcast today. I'm very excited to get into this one with you.
Jeff, really appreciate you reaching out and thinking enough of our program and myself to have me on. So really excited to jump into some stuff with you, and it's always good hearing some of those things, just having memory flashes throughout that from accomplishments from the team wise, but just individual players, and thinking back to kind of some of the highlights that happened over the course of my coaching career has been and that was fun just thinking about those while you're going through it.
Absolutely, and it's always fun to talk about things that have happened in the past and kind of relive some stories. Now, for you, you've spent a lot of time with Coach Heller. You played for Coach Heller. You coached for Coach Heller at the University of Northern Iowa. You're coaching for him again now. I'm interested in that because I think that anytime 2 coaches spend a lot of time together and a lot of years together, there's really something to that. How much has Coach Heller meant for your career, and maybe that would also lead into kind of why you've decided, why is Coach Heller the guy that you want to stick with? Why have you spent so much time of your career coaching with, playing for and then coaching with Coach Heller?
Well, I mean, it even stretches back to, I knew about Coach Heller, about Rick, when I was in high school. I went to a small high school in Iowa, Cascade, which is not far from Dubuque, about an hour north of Davenport. Rick was, of course, up in Fayette at Upper Iowa at the time, but we all grew up around this men's league, semi-pro baseball baseball circuit. And Rick was a player. Rick would play most of the summers and did until, I don't know when he was ultimately done, probably late 30s or so when he stopped playing. But I'd see his name all over the place. He played for a team called the Fan Cardinals and ran that. So they would come down and they would play Cascade and the semi-pro stuff. And I don't know that I ever played against him, but I definitely was around when he was playing. And then he was in our high school recruiting for Upper Iowa, met with myself at that time. So we had brief conversations there. And then obviously I went to junior college. He stayed at Upper Iowa. He got the UNI job a year after my freshman year, I think, at Kirkwood. So we were all really excited. Anybody who was a baseball guy in Iowa knew who Rick was and knew the success he had at Upper Iowa. And when he got that job, everybody was really excited about what they thought he could do at UNI as a Division I coach. So ended up committing there out of Kirkwood, and actually the summer after my sophomore year, I didn't really know where I was going. He gave me an opportunity to come up to UNI and play, which was a great decision. So I got to play for him for 2 years, and it really was in line with the type of baseball I grew up playing. And I played for a high school coach who won over 1,000 games, Jerry Rowland, who, if I think of coaches who had such, really large influences on me as players and coaches, Coach Rowland, Coach Heller, Tim Evans, who was a coach at Kirkwood, even my year with Joel Holst, I learned a lot. Those guys all had a big influence, but probably none bigger than Rick. Especially, I owe my whole coaching career to Rick. He hired me as a volunteer at UNI after my first year at Wartburg, and then I've been with him, all the way through the UNI years after that, and then he hired me off the scrap heap to come back to Iowa. So, I don't owe anybody more than him as far as coaching is concerned. So, I think the biggest thing for Rick, and one of the reasons that I probably have never went anywhere else is, and it's just his ideals, his values, what he believes is important as far as the baseball program is concerned, and how he goes about coaching are directly in line with the way I grew up and the way I've come to believe as a coach myself. And anytime that you are in sync that way, you never necessarily are looking for the next job. You're always excited about what we can continue to do here, what we may be able to do in the future, and that's really kind of how I've thought of my time with Rick, is just constantly learn every single day. And he is a very democratic coach when it comes to his coaching staff. He is constantly looking for input, and you never feel like you have to dance around things with Rick. You can always be truthful and honest, and regardless if you're agreeing with him or not, if it's a tough conversation, that conversation is over when you walk out the door. And there's no animosity, there's no awkwardness, there's none of that going on. He takes to heart anything that you're willing to share with him. Doesn't mean he's always going to agree with you or do the things that you want to do, but man, he's going to hear you out. And what a great situation to be in as a coach.
Absolutely. I think anybody that coaches, especially as an assistant coach, that's kind of what you want. You want somebody who's going to give you responsibility. You want somebody who's going to listen to your thoughts and ideas and legitimately consider what you've got to say and wants your input. And if you don't have that situation, it's tough, no matter what age you are, whether you're a young guy or you're a veteran. You want to work with other guys that respect and appreciate what you can bring to the team. No question about that. Can you talk about, just to go a level deeper, can you just talk about some of the other values maybe that Coach Heller instilled in you, from the time when you were a player and a young volunteer, things that you take with you now, and if you ever, coach anywhere else, if you get a head job or you move on from Iowa for whatever reason, maybe some things that you've learned from him or even other coaches really that are lessons that always stick with you and that you believe are important and kind of establish the basis of who you are as a coach.
I think a couple things. One thing that jumps out all the time with Rick, he is really present as a coach. And I think I always noticed that as a player. I still notice that as an assistant is he comes to coach guys every day. He doesn't come to be a CEO or anything like that. He is involved in the coaching of our baseball team on a daily basis. He takes he does our infield work. He is involved with the hitting stuff as well, but he's present every day. And I think when you have a coach who is getting his hands dirty on a daily basis, I think you really have I think you have the respect of your team. I really do. They know that he's out there grinding away and plugging away every day just like they are. The other thing with Rick, and I will say this goes back to Joel Holstead Werper and my head coach in high school. They were all super prepared and organized on a daily basis. Practice was thought out. Practice is not just thrown together. There's an idea and things to accomplish at practice every day with the plan they put together. And I think that organization, he had to do that when he was at Upper Iowa, as a Division III coach, and he had 60 players. If he wasn't organized, he wasn't going to get anything accomplished that day. Joel Holst was the same way. He worked the Oklahoma JV programs plus their varsity program, 50 to 60 guys, super organized, guys who maxed out their practice plan every day with whether we were in the gym or at the field, it was well thought out, and that remains with him on a daily basis. We meet as a staff about practice, almost every day, definitely at the beginning of the week to lay it out. We're never going to show up without a plan to get better that day. So I think those are two things that are really important with Rick. And also the last thing, he's just a really humble guy. He wants all the praise to go to the people around him, and he doesn't like to listen to the praise that he receives. He's just a humble guy. If there's a piece of trash, he picks it up. If there's balls to be picked up or bats to put away, he's not waiting for somebody else to do it. Here you have the head coach of a Power 5 program who's just fully invested in the program and fully invested in it just being a good person. That just goes a long way. So those are some things I picked up from him. And as a coach, you and I talked a little bit before we got going about somebody you coached with, Justin Schulte. But I think it's the same feeling, we talked about that Justin made you want to be a better coach and demanded that you be a better coach. And so those are things that, let's be honest, they make you a better coach or else you're not going to be there. So I think those are reasons he's been successful and continues to be successful and continues to improve.
It's great to hear, and it's very true. We did talk about this before we started recording this, but just the genuineness of Coach Heller and really everyone on the staff at the University of Iowa. Not to make a plug for the program, but it's true. They're limited interactions, but my interactions with everyone from the whole program, the baseball program at University of Iowa, has always been great. And I know Coach Schulte has spoken very highly of Heller. From when I coached it with Coach Schulte the first time, you guys were at Northern Iowa and you were recruiting our players. And even then, I know that Coach Schulte spoke very highly of Coach Heller even at that time. And there's a lot of respect, I know, for that guy. Not just around the state of Iowa, but everywhere. I think everywhere in college baseball, I think he's a very, very respected person. I like that you had talked about just the preparedness of practice and always having a plan. And it's not always easy to do as a coach. Let's talk about hitting a little bit. When you are preparing for practice, what do you hope to get out of practice every day? Or maybe it varies a little bit, but can we kind of talk about just planning for practice a little bit? And your facilities obviously might be different than other people's, but generally speaking, your outcome and what you're trying to accomplish is probably, able to be accomplished almost anywhere. Can you talk about how you prepare for practice right now?
The one thing we really try to do is break up any type of monotony that can happen. My hope is our guys come to practice. Obviously we're going to talk specifically on the hitting side, that they know they're going to do something a little bit different, each day. Maybe the weeks look similar, but each day is going to be a little bit different. And, we utilize a lot of tech. There are a few things that we know. We do a lot of vision training with our hitters. We test all of our position players' vision at the beginning of the fall. We work with a team of eye doctors that are basically part of the team, and they put together plans to improve our guys. So that's a part of everyday practice, some way, shape, or form. Is there's going to be some type of vision training. We're doing a lot of pitch recognition stuff. So we just try to maybe take a little piece of everything every day. And so, it might be more, I'm trying to say more team-based hitting one day and then way more individual hitting the other day. We try to add velo, try to do some type of stress every single day as far as velocity is concerned. We try to mix in secondary stuff frequently. So we just got all these little areas that we want to take a piece from every single day to make sure that they come to practice, and when we get to hitting, they're like, no, this isn't the same old stuff, And when you're outside and you have the ability to get outside, that's way easier. When you're more inside and you're more cage relegated, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But we're lucky enough to have again a lot of different hack attack machines, a lot of different technology-based things that we have a tendency to be able to break things up. So, those are the types of things we're trying to do. Like I said, going back to the tech stuff, I think in today's world, you can't be married to it, but you definitely have to have some knowledge on it with the way kids learn. I think nowadays, they want instant feedback, and the tech allows you to do that. I think the tech also maybe you're seeing something in a hitter. There's a story being told there with their approach and their plan and these types of things. And a lot of times TrackMan or Blast Motion or some of these other tech things that we have then give you they give you the back up to the story, right? They give you all the information. It's like, listen, you can show the kid. It's not just by word of mouth. And here's several instances from a data perspective that are proving, what we're talking about. So I think in today's world, it's really important to have that involved in your program.
Great stuff. And if you don't mind, I'd like to spend some time talking about that in just a minute. But I just want to kind of ask a very general question before that. If a high school coach is listening to this, or even a kid that kind of works on his own, do you have thoughts on how many swings in a day or in a week like a hitter should be taking? Like what's optimal, what's too much, what's not enough? Do you have thoughts on that, just to kind of give people, again, listening to this, how many swings in a week should a hitter be striving for? Or maybe there's something else, another goal you have in mind of, like, we need to do this many times this week or this amount or whatever, just to sort of optimize training time and optimize a kid's opportunity to get better.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard, it's hard to put concrete numbers on those things, because I think there is some individuality that comes out, in the amount that they do. And then the hardest thing, I think, is varying the quality and quantity aspects, right? It's okay if we're just going out there and swinging with no plan, and coach, I'm swinging 100 times a day and whatever, but if there's really no plan or path that you're on with those swings, I really think you're just running in place. So the quality is really important. The concentration is really important. The ideal of, hey, what am I trying to accomplish today, I think is way more important than probably the number of swings you take. So maybe one day you're just going in there and you just want to work on an aspect of your swing, whether it be mechanics or approach or stuff like that, and maybe you only need 50 swings that day. And maybe that's all you're capable of that day from a concentration standpoint, right? I mean, it's hard to sit there. Everybody's wired differently, and some guys just can't sit there for that long a period of time with a good line of focus. So I think it's just kind of knowing yourself and what you're capable of. And, if fatigue's really starting to happen, then you need to back off. There's a lot of guys that, talk about, why would you ever take more than 5 swings or more than 2 or 3 swings in one round? Because of what normally happens in an at-bat, right? You're normally not going to have 4 or 5 swing at-bats. Some people believe that the less is more type of thing. But I do think there's a balance. I wish I had just a number. But I think you can go out and hit every day. I just don't think you should do the same thing every day. I think you should stretch yourself. You should make it hard on yourself on days. I think there's days you shouldn't make it hard on yourself. I just think there's a balance there with what guys do. And again, what may be good for you may not be good for the guy next to you. And I don't think you necessarily have to get caught up in what's going on around you. Think more individually with what you're doing. And as coaches, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make sure, what's good for Johnny might not be good for Tim. And so being able to, not necessarily just have this one big plan for everybody, making sure we individualize it to a degree is what we're trying to do as coaches, and you should definitely do that as a player as well.
How do you sort of manage then the expectation to your players, as far as guys that I'm sure you still have this right now on your team at times, but guys that you feel like are not hitting enough, other guys you feel like maybe hitting too much. They're not hitting real well, and after a game they want to go hit in the cage for an hour, and maybe sometimes you got to pump the brakes a little bit. And other guys you've got to say to them, hey, I think you got to hit a little bit more than you're hitting. How do you make that distinction from player to player? And again, just talking to coaches that are maybe listening to this and just helping them to become better hitting coaches, how do you make a distinction of when a guy is maybe working too much or not working enough, and you might have to have somebody ramp up a little bit?
I think some of, having some tech and being lucky enough to have blast motion for all of our guys and be able to have some of those things, I think sometimes the data will tell you, right? That maybe the numbers are breaking down. They're not consistent with what the numbers typically are. So that's obviously a time you need to back off. Especially on game day, Rick and I think both agree that there is a swing count. We don't want to wear those guys out from a swing standpoint on game day. You definitely got to get your work in. I think it's really important, especially thinking to college or thinking to the high school and the youth coaches. Everything's so game oriented in a lot of ways nowadays. You have to make sure that you utilize your game day as a day to get better. And so making sure you have a good plan for them, for pre-game hitting and your batting practice prior to the game. Not just allowing them to show up and hit. Then there's days that probably you need to just show up and hit. But having a good plan throughout your season when you're really game heavy is really important. So we utilize our batting practice leading into a game. That's our time to kind of maybe work on a thing or two if we need to, but really make sure that we have a program in place to keep them sharp. I think it's really important. But like you said, sometimes there's just some trial and error with learning individuals and learning what makes them go. I mean, we've had guys that you had to kick them out of the cage. We've had guys that, aren't in there as much. And I think sometimes the performance and, we don't like to talk about results, but some of that will either show you that it's successful or it's not successful. And the other thing we really try to do is create competition within our development. We have a board in our hitting facility with all the exit velocities on every type of instrument that we use. And when I talk about instruments, I mean an overload bat, an underload bat, a really heavy bat, a normal bat, whatever it may be. And so they're constantly competing. And anytime they break those numbers, they have the freedom to go write their new number in there. So whether that happens in a practice setting or whether that happens on their own, they all have that ability. So just doing some things like that to create some of that competition, I think sometimes will motivate them to maybe put the work in. And again, I think if you have a good culture of guys that are in the cage a lot, come out to hit early every single day, then obviously, they're going to pull along those guys that maybe don't have that internal motivation that makes them tick to want to do it, as much as some of the guys do.
Let's talk about tech a little bit. I think that technology that's out there can be intimidating to guys sometimes that are a little bit older, or maybe they're coaching at lower levels and they're a little bit of intimidated to kind of adapt it at their levels. I think at most college levels now, especially colleges, well, I think at all colleges, I think it's almost understood that you're going to use some kind of tech, probably at most schools out there, and just sort of depends what your budget looks like as far as what you're able to do and how much. But if we can talk tech a little bit in hitting, and maybe not even necessarily the tools that you're using, but maybe how you implement this stuff and why some of it's important. I do bring up social media a good bit in these podcasts because I think social media is something that people battle with, coaches, because you see such strong opinions and such strong opposition on social media sometimes that it's almost like no matter how much conviction you have in something, you can hear some pretty strong voices that will try to talk you out of it and maybe make you question a little bit what you're doing or why you're doing it. And I know with most tech, there's always kickback. There's always those people who don't think it has a place. There's people that think that the game is you're losing kind of the eye test or losing the other non-measurable things when you focus too much on tech. So let's talk a little bit maybe about what you do with your guys, and maybe you can kind of talk about what you'd like. But let me just ask you this question: what are some things that you measure, or that some measurables that you get from tech that you wouldn't otherwise get? And maybe we can talk about those individually, such as launch angle, exit velocity, things like that. What are some things that you guys measure there, Coach, with your hitters?
We measure all of the things that you just said. I mean, we measure exit velocity in both of our, basically every KG we have. Well, two of them for sure that have radar guns basically set in them, where there's a LED board that's going to register every exit velocity. Up there, we have hit tracks in another cage, so that's obviously measuring exit velocity. We have ropes that we put up in our cages that our managers have measured out, launch angles, whether it be from 0 to 12 degrees and then 12 to 15. So there's always this constant, these external cues that the guys have to give direct feedback on what's going on. We'll have times in the cage we track a lot of stuff that there'll be maybe anything that's 95 plus exit velo with the launch angle from 12 to 25. And again, we have these ropes to indicate what's happening, making a point. Or maybe it's, this particular one, as soon as you leave those parameters, you have to get out of the cage. So we just try to create some competition. We try to track a lot of these things. So those are some things that we do for sure. We do have, like I said, blast motion. So the guys are getting feedback on their phones pretty much throughout practice. Again, the slippery slope is that they become a prisoner to these numbers, and they become a prisoner to what their phone says on their swing. And we just try to make sure that we have a good balance of, hey, that swing looked really good. I don't really care what the blast motion said. All right, if we can repeat what you just did, you're going to be just fine. And then there are other aspects when we know that maybe something may be happening in the swing, that there's a flaw. We all can see it. Maybe we can't really quantify it, or they can't feel it, or whatever you show it to them on video, it doesn't quite click. Well, then maybe it shows up on their blast motion, and we can tell them, listen, this is what we're talking about. You're dragging your barrel, you're losing connection, all these types of things shown right here. And they just get a different style of feedback than just the old, word of mouth or voice to video type of stuff. So I do think, listen, we have a lot of tech. I have learned a ton. I have way more to learn. It is a part of what we do, but there is a mix that needs to happen. We can't be heavy on one and not the other. I really believe, say this all the time, we can be great on all the tech things, right? When we get in a cage, we have a great launch angle. Our exit velo is 105 plus. We have all these measurables that are in a really great place. But if I take those measurables and I go to the plate without a plan or without the right mindset, I don't care what that stuff looks like, you're not going to be successful. And we've all seen the guys do the numbers. don't quantify what they do in a game. They go in the game and they're way different. They're successful because they get the barrel on the ball. It doesn't matter. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't have the prettiest numbers, but their hand-eye coordination and their barrel the ball skills are elite. And then you have the guys that are great and they put up the best numbers in your program, and then they get in the game and it just never clicks. And so you really have to do a good job balancing that out. And if you don't, then you're going to have all of these pretty automobiles without a steering wheel, right? They're not drivable. So we need to be able to put it on the field. And, I think back going into, not to run on all this stuff, but think back when you're talking about social media. It is a great time. It is a great time to be alive as far as information is concerned. And, we need to take in the information. There is a lot of good stuff out there. There is a lot of abrasive people. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't good, but you should always take in the information. You should never think that somebody doesn't have something to give you as far as learning is concerned. So find out what works best for you. That's really important. You have to have a set of beliefs yourself, because if you don't, you're going to always be moving and changing, right? And you're never going to have anything set that you can go back to. So I think it's important to have some beliefs. It doesn't mean they can't change over time and that you aren't looking to learn, but to just kind of whitewash all that stuff that's out there is crazy. There's just a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of guys way smarter than me doing a lot of great things on the hitting side. So my job is to educate myself and to make sure that I'm constantly trying to evolve and to be a forward thinker, and that comes from our head coach because he's built the same way. So, I would never tell you that there's nothing good out there. There's a lot of good things out there. We all know people have agendas that are different than ours. If I'm just teaching kids in a facility, that's way different than maybe what we're doing as far as trying to go out there in 60 games, win 40 games. We need to win. We need to be successful on the field. So, I just think it's always going to be a little different as opposed to somebody who's just out there, maybe even on the pro side who's in the minor leagues, where you don't necessarily have to worry about the team success, the individual success, where I think definitely we have to balance those two things a lot differently than others do.
And what you said right there at the end, toward the end, is one of the things that Figured Out Baseball is built on. Video-wise, we only have college and pro coaches that are on the site that are contributing video, and that's for the reason you just said. There are a lot of great guys that work in facilities, and there are, guys that coach guys that coach at the college level that are horse shit. It's just, it exists. But primarily at the college level, you have guys that are trying to win. And I think that you don't teach something, if you're a college coach, you don't teach something unless you believe it's going to produce numbers that are going to produce wins. And for that reason, we only allow college and pro coaches to contribute content, whereas, there are some guys that own facilities out there that are going to change their philosophy every couple of years to stay with the trends, and that's what keeps kids coming through the door. And for that very reason, we set up Figured Out Baseball like we do, because we want people to look at Figure It Out like a resource they can really trust, and feel like you know where you're getting the information from, and that the guys that are teaching you for the right reasons, and they're teaching you what they're doing with their teams primarily.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I was just thinking to myself, one of my good friends in coaching, Dan Fitzgerald, who's assistant down at Dallas Baptist, who they teach hitting as well as anybody does in the nation. And if your ultimate goal isn't to touch home plate, then what are we doing, right? I mean, what we're trying to teach in offense is to score runs. And whatever allows us to do that more frequently is what we should be doing. And that's a very broad topic that has lots of limbs to it. But ultimately, that's what you should be trying to do, and that's how you should be teaching. So if that's not the ultimate goal, then I don't know what we're doing then.
Let's talk specifically about some of the numbers that you get from technology, and maybe just try to help coaches to understand how to implement some of this stuff. So let's talk about launch angle first. You see launch angle a lot. You see launch angle and exit velocity a lot when you watch Major League Baseball games now, and if things go well, we're not far away from seeing some Major League Baseball this season. Well, at the time we're recording this, launch angle. Can you talk about how you use launch angle as a resource, as a tool for your players? For someone who really doesn't understand much about it, or for someone that's out there that says, well, I don't need a launch angle. I don't need to know the launch angle to tell you that was a rod, or to tell you that like that was a hard hit ball, or to tell you that was, I don't need a launch angle to tell me whether or not that was going to be a ground ball or a fly ball. Yeah, I agree with that to a point, but there's something you can learn. I think there's something to launch angle to a point. How do you use launch angle as a coach? How do you talk about launch angle with your players to help them become better, better hitters and better overall offensive producers?
Well, it's funny. I always just laugh when the term launch angle comes up, because you just have, it's such a divisive term for a lot of people. And you hear it on baseball broadcasts and all this stuff. And I just laugh. People have been trying to hit line drives since the dawn of time. Nothing changes. It's the same thing. Now it's quantifiable because of the launch angle stuff, right? We actually have a specific range that we know leads to a high amount of success. And generally 10 to 25 degrees. If we're in that range, we're going to hit a lot of doubles and we're going to score a lot of runs. And that hasn't changed. They were trying to do that in 1955 as well. I mean, they were trying to lift the ball. They're trying to drive gaps. They were trying to do all these things. It's just now we have something that we can put numbers on. So I just laugh when I hear all that stuff. Now, obviously, the launch angle stuff is a result, right? It's based upon our swing. It's based upon our efficiency. It's based upon, how we're getting to the ball. And so, it's an external cue that I think becomes really important for our guys to get direct feedback. And we have all these lines, like I said, we have ropes all over our batting cages. So they know if the ball is striking the cage between these ropes, that they're going to hit 750, all right? And they're going to hit a bunch of doubles, okay? So anytime that you can give them that type of cue in today's world, I think is really important. And Rick gave a great speech at the national convention, the ABCA, and talked about how, basically external cues have become a really big topic, and that's all what we want to go to, as opposed to internal cues. That's something where we're saying, hey, Johnny, make sure your hands are here, or something like that. And they've gotten beaten up, pretty badly over the course of the last probably 5-6 years now that all this tech is involved. But there's still an aspect of coaching that we need to have internal cues. We need to give them internal cues. It's just, we got to be able to balance them. So the launch angle stuff is external. It's stuff that they can see. We know that it's a result-based thing upon, where our mechanics are, or how we're approaching the ball, or how we're moving our body. So it just tells us the story, right? Hey, Johnny's hitting everything on the ground or less than 5 degrees. Okay, well, he's hit the ball 100 miles an hour, but he's only going to hit 275 on those balls. Well, we need that to change. We need that to be different. And then that external feedback will give him, whether it's off the tee, it's off a flip, it's off the BP, it's off a hack. If we can get him to consistently put the ball up into that 10 to 15 degrees, or he's a power hitter, 15 to 25, well, his results are going to be vastly different. So that's how I look at it. I think it's so important to understand. And I know people use the term launch angle swing as something that's really negative, especially if you're somebody that's maybe an old school type of guy, but it's no different than what's been trying to go on for years and years. And if you came to our practice, we still try to hit balls hard on the ground during practice at times too. It's not just based on we're trying to lift balls in the air and hit the balls out of the yard on every swing. There's importance to the game. I go back again and stealing Fitzy stuff at DBU, but if all you can do is shoot threes, maybe you're not going to be in the game late, or if you can't hit free throws, meaning you can't move the baseball or score the guy from third, you're not going to be in at the end of the game. You need to be diverse as a hitter. So, you can use the launch angle to benefit, that thought and that philosophy pretty well.
I have a couple three spin-off questions, actually, then from that question, and you sort of maybe answered the first two a little bit. I'll sort of combine the first two here for you. If you've got a guy on your team, honestly, regardless of whether the kid's on your team or he's 14 years old, Coach, if you have a guy that physically doesn't have the power to hit the ball over the wall, is there a launch angle that guy should be shooting for? And is that different than a guy, regardless of the level that he plays, again, whether he's 15 years old, 14, 15, or whether he's a senior on your team? Is there a different optimal launch angle based on what a hitter is physically capable of doing? I guess to sort of summarize, if a guy, I had a guy at a junior college once who squared the ball up a good bit, but he hit the ball up in the air too high, in my opinion, and the ball just kind of floated up there, and you have a couple guys in the outfield that can really run, and the ball was run down most of the time. And we had a conversation at that time, before the word launch angle even existed, about basically lowering his launch angle so he could get some hits. Instead of hitting what amounted to be a high line drive, and if the guy had better exit velocity, they'd be doubles and homers. But for him, they're 300-foot flyouts. So I guess let me just start right there. Is there an optimal launch angle for someone who would be considered maybe a singles and doubles hitter based on his power? And is there an optimal launch angle for someone who would be considered a double and home run guy based on his power at whatever his respective level is?
100%. I think back to the 2017 when we led the Big Ten in homers or whatever. We had Jake Adams who started played 2 years at DMAC. And then we got him for his junior year in Iowa. He had 29 homers, and he had the best power I've ever witnessed on a baseball field. And then we also had a second baseman who's 5'8", Mitch Bowe. Those guys are not working in the same area. It's funny, we generally talk about the ground ball portion of the low launch angle, but having 35 degrees or plus as your launch angle consistently is no good either. The ground ball usually can find some holes at least, or guys have to defend it. Where 35 plus, they're outs. They're outs at every level. So there definitely is a difference between the type of person. And one thing I think as a hitting coach, it's really important to talk to your guys and establish the type of hitter that they are. And that doesn't mean it needs to be dictated by the coaching staff. Obviously, we're going to have strong opinions about who we think they should be as a hitter. You want to involve them. But if Mitch Bowe, our little second baseman, was trying to hit balls at 25 degrees, they're going to be out. And if Jake's hitting balls, below 10 degrees, he's not utilizing the special gift that he has. So Mitch would be probably a guy that we would really say, we want you in that 10 to 15 degree launch angle, all right? 8 to 15. We know that's going to be hard line drives that are going to get over the infield's heads, that could hit some gaps and hit some doubles. And so we want you to work in that angle. Where Jake, hey, listen, Jake, we want you in the 20-25 range, 18 to 25, because if Jake hits them at 25 degrees, they're gone. They're out every single time, as long as he's got it on the barrel. So you definitely want to individualize it, and think about the type of player that person is, and the type of, wherever his gift lies. If he's a really athletic and he runs, well, we don't want them hitting 20-degree launch angle balls. We don't want the ball there, unless they have the ability to drive it out of the park. We want him to err on the ball, on being down, right? And then the guy with power, we want to err on the side being up. So those are the types of things you're working through and talking to your guys about, and obviously having all of that feedback at their fingertips, whether it be a hit tracks machine or again, the high school guys that don't have the ability to buy things like that, just decorate that cage. Decorate the cage with strings and targets and just these external cues that the guys know. All of the measurements you can figure out online. We're lucky enough to have really smart managers, and you said you're gonna talk to our pitching coach here pretty soon, and most of the time he walks in a room, he's going to be the smartest guy, and he's a good resource to have. So, again, you can do all of those things and give your guys some feedback that's really simple, and you don't need blast motion, and you don't need rapsodo hitting, and you don't need, some of these tech things to do that.
Back before launch angle was a thing, I used to equate things with my hitters with golf clubs, which I think most people are at least aware of. And going back to that hitter at the junior college that didn't hit the ball very far and hit it too much in the air, I just equated it to him like it's like you're hitting a 5-iron right now, but I want you to hit the driver. Like it's just to create a visual image for him as far as how much in the air you want this ball to be. And I think most golf clubs out there probably say what the loft is off the club, and I think that gives a guy a pretty good idea. And heck, maybe whoever first thought of the term launch angle and bringing it into baseball, maybe they were a golfer first and and started there. I don't know.
Jeff, it's funny you say that. A lot of the technology came from golf. Whether it be Rapsodo or TrackMan, a lot of that started out as golf tech. So 100% there's correlation between what was probably happening in the golf world 10 years ago, and now it's translated over to the baseball world. So you were way ahead of your time there, son. Way ahead.
Well, I did what I could because I was always at schools with low budgets and so we had to be pretty creative in a lot of ways. Next question, staying on launch angle, one of the spin-off questions. This might be a tough one for you to answer, but it's always interesting to me. As a Pirate fan, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm a big Pirate fan. Jordy Mercer was a shortstop for the Pirates for quite a few years. Now he's with the Tiger. I think he's still with the Tigers this year. Jordy Mercer was a big shortstop, 6'3", probably 210 pounds, whatever. He could hit the ball as far as anybody. He played with McCutchen and some other guys like that, and he could hit the ball as far as those guys, but he didn't hit nearly as many home runs. And honestly, I don't. Jordy Mercer's probably going to call me up and bitch at me for talking about him, but he's just a good example and a guy I've had in my mind for a while, and this is the first time I've brought it up with anybody. Jordy Mercer didn't square the ball up as much as Andrew McCutchen, as much as Starling Marte. Right? So even though he could hit the ball as far as those guys, when he squared it up, he didn't hit that many balls over the wall. And part of the reason in my mind is that he just didn't barrel balls up as often as they did. Didn't have quite the timing that those guys did. So maybe he was a guy that tried to hit the ball at a lower launch angle because the percentage of the time that he squared the ball up wasn't as high as some of the really elite guys, like some of the perennial all-stars out there. Is that something else that you work with? Whereas maybe a guy has, big time raw power, but if you don't square the ball up on a consistent enough basis, isn't it safer to hit the ball at a lower launch angle where you actually have a chance to get on base more? Whereas if you're hitting the ball in the air and either you miss hit a little bit or your timing's not quite right, so maybe instead of hitting it, at whatever your highest launch angle is, you hit it at 75% of what 75% of what your maximum exit velocity is what you're capable of. You're not going to get on base that much, and ultimately you got to get on base. Of course, you want to hit the ball over the wall, but if you're going to be a productive hitter, you've got to be on base from time to time, right? You can't hit 215 and occasionally hit a home run and expect to be in the lineup. Am I way off on this, or is this something that, like, if you have a guy that's sort of that way, has the raw power, but doesn't necessarily square the ball up at an elite level, do you need to kind of lower the launch angle a little bit to give that guy a chance to really have some success and maybe miss hit a ball and still get a hit?
Well, I just think there's a lot of layers to that, right? Because, the mentality may need to change. But when you have guys like that, I ultimately go to either the the stuff that has nothing to do with your actual physical swing. What's your plan? Okay, what's your approach? I mean, this is why it's so important to marry these things, because, like I was telling you before, and I'll say it again. If you have a Cadillac, but it has no steering wheel, it's worthless. You can't drive the thing. So there are guys that have, like you said, have great launch angles and can really hit the ball a long ways. But if they go up there without a plan, they can't make adjustments, they can't do some of the things that we know are really important as a hitter, it's never going to materialize for them. And so as a coach, you need to figure out, okay, where is this going wrong? Is there something physically happening, right? Is there some type of flaw in how we approach the ball? Are we too steep? Okay, meaning are we chopping down on the ball a little bit too much? Meaning maybe we're not in the contact zone very long. Or are we dumping the barrel? Are we way too uphill? Which is the same problem of being too steep. You know, we need to maximize time in the hitting zone. That's how you barrel stuff up. Okay, that's how we be consistent. And so if those things check out, when you're like, man, this swing is in a really good place, the next thing I'm doing is I'm having his eyes checked. And because, you know, if we have bad depth perception or we have convergence issues, so on a depth perception situation, it's like he can never truly figure out where the ball is in space. And if you can't, you know, we're going to have trouble squaring it up. And these are things. That's why we do the vision training every year. We can improve these things. Your eyes aren't just going to be your eyes. We can make them better. And we've had so many great stories of guys really improving that aspect and then taking off as hitters. We had it on the flip side when we weren't doing all those things where you're like, man, everything looks great. I don't know what's going on. And here we come to find out he has really poor vision. He should have been wearing contacts. He should have been, you know, whatever he should have been doing to improve, he wasn't doing. And therefore, guys just fall through the cracks with great ability, but no, I guess, no way to kind of make sure that it's happening in the box. So I think you're right on. Your how you're approaching and what you're trying to do may change. And I think that's where you get a lot of rub, you know, Twitter, you know, for the Alex Rodriguez's of the world, and then you got all the hitting guys who've done a ton of research and basically are really poo-pooing what some of these pro guys are saying because they're saying, well, I just try to hit down to the baseball. Okay, just because they think that doesn't mean that's what their swing is, but that swing thought for them works. And so who in the heck are we to tell them they're wrong? I don't think we are. Doesn't mean him thinking that his swing was doing that actually kept him connected, kept him, you know, gave him the ability to be consistent. So I think going back to what you said, yes, I think you may need to change some of what you do. Yeah, we don't want to hit the ball on the ground, but maybe we have to try to do that, especially if a guy has a high ride fastball and it's one of those with a high spin rate that you know doesn't maybe have the vertical break that a sinker guy would be. And the sinker guy maybe have to try to hit underneath that baseball and try to scoop it out into the outfield. So there's so many different things in the sport that are important in the game that, yeah, we want to improve these numbers, but there's a way larger story to tell with your approach and plan that really go into whether you're going to be consistent as a hitter.
You mentioned early on there in that answer just about having a plan at the plate, and that was I'm going to embarrass myself with how much I think about the Pirates and their lineup here, but with Jordy Mercer, he was the guy that, you know, when you had J.D. Drew becoming J.D. Drew and you had Justin Turner becoming Justin Turner and Max Muncy doing what he did, guys that were kind of afterthoughts becoming all-stars, even Josh Donaldson taking his game to a completely another level. You'd see Jordy Mercer hit a 430-foot home run, and you'd think, if he just tried to do that every time up, could he be a 30-homer shortstop? Because he's a, you know, while maybe some of the metrics didn't always say that he was a great shortstop, you watch him every day, and the guy's very, very consistent shortstop, right? And you just kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking, could he be a guy that hits 30 homers in a season if he just tried to? Because he's got this natural, he's got power. He's got big-time power in his bat. And it was just sort of a question on my mind. I know there's a lot to it, but, you know, you often just kind of have those questions as a fan and kind of wonder what's going on behind the scenes. And, of course, there's a lot of things I don't know of course, and I'm just using Jordy as someone that just is an interesting subject to me. Like, okay, if the guy can physically hit a ball this far, should we have him try to hit the ball that far every time up? Or are there certain types of hitters where even though he does have that power, we're going to kind of stay away from that and try to just let him spray the ball around and get on base because that's his best chance of contributing to the offense. I don't know what the right answer is, but I thought you might. You're a lot smarter than I am.
Well, I'm not smarter than you, but here's what I would say on that. That in essence is coaching, right? What we're trying to do is coaching. I don't mean that in a way that's why Jordy is or isn't producing at the level that he should be. But our jobs as coaches is to figure out what helps each person click, or what clicks for each person. And what clicks for Alex Rodriguez, like you said, he tries to hit down on the ball. Justin Turner tries to lift the ball every time, or Josh Allen tries to lift the ball every time. That works for them. We can't assume that that means that's going to work for everybody. And it may have just been a simple thing that Jordy Mercer has just never quite figured out what's worked for him. And the other thing is, the pitchers are really good. The pitchers are really good. And so it's not easy. And the guys, there could be just a bevy of things. They could be a person that's extremely hard on themselves and lives and dies with each at bat and lives and dies with each swing. Those guys make life really hard for themselves to be consistent. And that's not something you automatically overcome, and that's sometimes something that nobody overcomes or somebody will never overcome. But those are the things you have to work through, and ultimately, again, as a coach trying to find out what makes them tick, right, and what will click for them is really important. And then ultimately making sure that we're creating ownership in the type of player they are from the actual player. They need to have ownership in how they're going about their business, what their plan is. Obviously, we're going to give them a bunch of information that will hopefully gear it towards success, but we need to make sure that they take ownership. So, when they're in fight or flight mode, it's the eighth inning of a tied game, and they're facing a really good arm, that they can go perform and they can make a tweak here or there. They can make an adjustment on the fly, or they can make an adjustment at bat to at bat that we can't do for them. So, that's coaching. We just have to give them as much of that information as they can handle. Everybody's different. We can't give the same amount of information to everybody, but our job is to prepare them. We do that through an everyday thing with drill work and all that stuff, but we also better be preparing them for what's going on between their ears, giving them a great plan to control the moment and be in control of every pitch. And if those two things aren't present, it's really hard to be a good hitter.
Coach, do you have time for one more question along the tech lines? I know we're almost at the hour mark here. Do you have time for one more question?
I do.
I would like to talk about this, another analytic that's talked about quite a bit, that's out there, that's exit velocity. That's where you'll see guys that say, like, I've seen Jeff Fry. We've had him on a podcast before. He's a really interesting guy to talk to. But Jeff Fry will say, like, I don't need to know exit velocity to know that I just hit a rod, right here. And he'll show a little clip of himself hitting a line drive. Why is exit velocity something you want to track? What do you get out of it? How do you use it as a teaching point for your players?
Again, it's quantifiable. And I think in today's world, to be able to put numbers on things and ranges just helps you tell a story. Hey, this guy hit 25 homers. Okay, because his average launch angle is 22, and he's averaging 98 miles an hour off the bat. Well, we know that that's going to lead to a lot of success. I really struggle with kind of the feud that goes on, between the Jeff Frys and the other guys that are way more tech. Obviously, I just don't think you can dispute either one, and to sit there and just say we're all data, or I don't want any of the data, makes no sense to me. I can never understand how we can maximize making guys better if that's our stance. And so I obviously respect the Jeff Frys of the world because they got to the highest level and things were successful for them. And it doesn't mean some of his mentality stuff and what he thought about doesn't lead him down the road to success, and it sure doesn't mean that the J.D. Martinez of the world who are able to really jump into the data-related stuff and really think about certain things, it doesn't mean they're wrong either. So I scratch my head at a lot of this stuff, and it's unbecoming in a lot of ways. It's hard to watch or read through, but there is some comedy out there, I guess, too. But back to the exit velo stuff. So for me, what we're searching for is that guys can hit the ball as hard as possible with the most efficient movement, with the least amount of effort. I think that, to me, is what's really important, because when we're talking about high velocity type of stuff, and man, the average velocity that our guys see in today's age and they go into a college game, you know, when I first started coaching, when I was playing, is probably 3 to 5 miles an hour different. And so efficiency is really important. So we have to be able to move. We have to move the barrel in a way that we can maximize our exit velocity. And anybody who says that we don't want to do that is crazy. The proof's in the data. The harder you hit the ball, the more likely you are to get a hit, and the more likely you are going to drive it and hit extra base hits, which we all know leads to runs. So we have to be able to utilize that stuff. And again, it's just quantifiable. It just gives us all the stuff that, you know, if we're just telling the guy a story, it gives us concrete information to show them along with what we're seeing. And I think there's a marriage there that works. And I'm not here to think and say that we have all the answers on that stuff. I just know that, you know, to live on one side of the fence or the other isn't hitting. You know, we can't only be driven by data. We can't only be driven by feel. There is definitely a middle ground that a ton of success. There is a ton of success in that middle ground. So that's what we're searching for, and that's why we constantly are trying to learn. I know I didn't delve a ton into the tech part of the exit velo, but why wouldn't they try to hit the ball hard when we know that we have data out there that says we hit, you know, 95 balls at 95 plus or over 100, guys hit 600 on, you know, whatever the data is. I don't know why it isn't good to know that information.
I agree. And I heard someone say at some point, I don't know when or where or who said it, but, you know, even power doesn't have to necessarily mean over the fence power. If you're a guy that, just say like a Juan Pierre type that just wants to slap the ball through the infield, the harder you hit a ground ball, the less time the infielder has to get to it, right? So, like, regardless of whether you're hitting ball in the air or whether you're trying to hit a one-hopper through the infield, the harder you hit it, the better chance you have of getting a hit. I mean, that's pretty common sense. And obviously, like you said, this just getting your exit velocity just quantifies and helps you. You know, maybe it takes away some cage bombs where a guy says he got it, and you can look at the data and say, sorry, you didn't get it. You didn't hit it that hard. But I mean, that makes sense to me on all levels.
Well, I think the other thing, going back to the quantifiable part of it, is you create this competitive culture within your team. You know, like I said, we have a board with all that stuff on there, you know, with their exit velos are, and, you know, they're competing with one another. And not everybody is specifically driven that way, but a lot of successful athletes generally are. They're competitive. That's why they like to play. And so you create this culture because you have this quantifiable data. If everybody was just, you know, saying, well, I just hit a rod, well, okay, well, what's that mean? And have some, to put a number on it, I just think it can be really beneficial in training and development. So we do it. And again, you know, that's not to say that anybody who doesn't do it is wrong. This is what we believe in. This is what, you know, we preach to our guys, and we hope that we create a culture of competitiveness and create a culture of continually trying to strive to be better. And so I just think that I would consider myself way more old school than I do new school, but I also know there's a lot of benefit in the new school stuff too. I just know I can't just be on one side of the fence or the other and think that I'm going to be able to be the best coach I possibly can be for our guys. I have to do a really good job of balancing those two things and figure out what works for each of our players individually. And if one guy doesn't need as much of the tech stuff, then he won't do as much of the tech stuff, and vice versa. So I just think that that middle ground is where we're all searching to be, or all trying to be. And for some guys, you're there a lot better than you are with other guys. And that's why we're constantly trying to figure out what we can do to get those guys there.
So I lied to you. I'm going to ask you one more question, just based on something you just said there. Do you still have players in today's world that the more data you give them, the more they're going to struggle with it? Because I know, before you had access to this kind of stuff, there were certain players where, like, the more you talked to them, the more you made them think about stuff, the worse they were going to be. The more you just basically said, hey, man, see it and hit it, the better they were going to be. Do you still have those players in today's game where, like, even if you're collecting data, you're not really sharing it with them because the more you ask them to analyze things or the more you analyze for them, the worse they become as a hitter? Do you still have that player today?
No question. And I think where you see it really bleed over to is scouting, right? And the preparedness that you're trying to make them for whatever's ahead of them that weekend or whatever. And some guys, we can go pretty in depth with scouting reports nowadays because of synergy and ability to watch a ton of video, to get TrackMan data from certain programs because, anybody who has TrackMan typically is kind of in the sharing business with TrackMan. So you have the ability to pull out of these numbers. So there's just a lot of things you can give the guys going into a weekend, especially as you get into the teeth of the season when there's more games. Then you have to be careful with those guys. There's guys that they just want to know if the pitcher's right or left-handed, and they're just going to go hit. Where there's guys that, I was a player myself. Give me everything you possibly can give me. I want to know everything about this guy. What's the velo? What does he use when he's in trouble? What are the percentages? Anything that I can get my hands on, I wanted to know. That was going to help me put together my plan. Where the other guys, like you said, there's a guy on the team that comes back to the dugout, and you're like, oh, he just, that home run he just hit was on a slider, right? I don't know. And they literally don't know. And you have to do a good job with those guys too. And we want to make sure that we're maximizing who they are as players, and that we're still trying to prepare them the best we can. But a lot of times less is more, and then you have the flip side where you can give a guy a ton of information and they'll eat it all up and they can still go perform. So that's coaching again, right? You're just trying to figure out what makes each guy tick, and what you can do to help them be successful is ultimately what we're all trying to do.
This is great. This is Marty Sutherland, everybody. He's the associate head coach at the University of Iowa, and just someone who I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to, someone that's a great blend of old school and new school, and really just, I think, gets what it takes to be successful, and just so much good wisdom and forethought, and just a lot of knowledge that I appreciate you sharing. That's the great thing about these podcasts. You get to hear from so many people from so many different backgrounds, and just college baseball coaches' willingness to share information is always amazing to me. So, Coach Sutherland, this has been great and very, very enjoyable on a personal level.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing a great thing for a lot of coaches, whether they be young coaches or college coaches. I think everybody can get something out of what you're doing from the video content you're putting on your website to the podcast style that you're doing. Just keep putting out the great content. I know it's not your only thing, but man, it's been a great resource for a lot of people, and it's been an honor to be able to sit down and talk with you about these things. And by no stretch do I know everything, but I have a lot to learn. So anytime that I can get my hands on the things that you're doing from different perspectives, it just always makes me feel like it's going to help me be a better coach.
Thank you. That means a great deal. And hopefully, if people have not, they're listening to this, you'll check out figureitoutbaseball.com. We've got 500 free videos and podcasts for you, as well as some premium content you can get into. And we'll just keep continuing to expand and do the best we can to provide the best information we can. Coach Sutherland, thank you so much for the time today, and best of luck to you and the team.
Thanks, Jeff, and stay safe, and hopefully we'll all be able to see each other down the road here sometime.
I hope so. I hope we just see some kind of baseball sometime soon.
That's right. Thanks